All right, guys, our favorite time of the week when we get to answer a few of your questions. Saagar, what is up first?
Aaron Tipping, great last name. Political apathy. Hey guys, longtime listener, proud premium subscriber. As I type, this news is broken. Dems have floated cutting paid family leave to appease corporatists like Manchin and Sinema. As someone who has campaigned in years past to help push progressive policies and candidates, how can leftists fight back against the do-nothing attitude of the Washington establishment without getting burned out and throwing in the towel?
Oh, that's such a hard question.
Oh, Aaron.
It's so depressing.
Sorry, buddy.
I mean, okay, so let's find a silver lining here. You do have at least progressives did win this battle to like keep the two things tied together. I think they're probably going to vote this crap down, and it's going to be, you know, a real blow to the Biden agenda. So at least there are progressives who are flexing a little bit of power and doing like, you know, a fraction of what the Tea Party agenda was. So that's not nothing. But if I had to really say the thing to focus on now is these labor movements across the country. That I think is where we're likely to see real change happening for working class people. And you can already see politicians responding a little bit. You saw Labor Secretary Marty Walsh going and joining a picket line. It's very unusual in historic terms. So clearly he's feeling pressure from the bottom up, seeing where the political winds are blowing. And so that might be the most effective place for you to spend your time right now, because the situation here is just depressing. I mean, it just is.
Here's what I would say. Politics is downstream from culture. The culture is dramatically shifting right now. And like in unprecedented ways, the biggest labor movements since World War II. And so something's got to give on the political front. I didn't say it would be now, maybe 10 years from now, maybe 20, because that's how our system works. But we have this massive blue collar phenomenon of people quitting work, going on strike. That will manifest politically at some point just because it has to, but you may have to wait a little bit.
Yeah.
Not a satisfying answer.
And actually this dovetails, the second question is David Joseph Deutsch, the Democratic Party, in light of the epic failure that is reconciliation in the Biden presidency, is there any hope for the Democratic Party to truly represent the interests of working people of this country?
Yeah.
There has to be massive, it's not just about changing the Democratic Party. I think there has to be massive structural change of the systems that we're using to start with. I mean, Andrew Yang is onto something in terms of focusing on, hey, let's have open primaries and let's have ranked choice voting, because that's a way to put pressure on the two parties that are in power. Money, obviously, and the salience of that is incredibly important. Something we focus on here all the time, corruption, is if you don't get at those roots, then you are going to keep getting these same results, because ultimately you have people like Krystal and Saagar who doesn't really care about the voters, doesn't really care to, I mean, it certainly doesn't look like she's even posturing for re-election. She's looking at, hey, how do I ultimately cash in when I get out of this joint, or how do I get my next big campaign check into my campaign account is what a lot of them are looking at. So I think if you don't address those roots, then you are going to keep getting the same results out of the Democratic Party that we've been getting.
I would say political system writ large. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right. But like I said, look, and something I have really come to terms with is that, and as corrupt as the system is, we're also a part of it. And so like when we talk about China and trade and all that, we're buying a lot of cheap stuff. It's our fault. Like, and politicians know that people are going to respond when people get mad. Or I did that segment on food inflation. Most people really liked cheap food, and they didn't realize what the price was. Now, they were sold a bill of goods, but to get out of that, like, we have to have some resiliency. And I'm not talking about personal responsibility or whatever. I'm saying, like, we need a different mindset shift in this country. So it's really difficult because people are cynical for good reason, and when you're cynical, you get selfish, and when you get selfish, it actually plays into a lot of these people's hands.
That's true.
That's really what I've seen.
That is true.
Okay, third question from John House. Saagar, World War I, that's the topic. I like it. Big fan. A bigger thank you to both of you for your chance, taking courage to push into the depths. Saagar, you mentioned that you are very into reading about World War I right now. For someone like me who has read more about World War II and the Civil War, what would be your two must-reads for this often forgotten event in our world history? Yes, very into World War I. I've answered this before. I think I did a video on my Instagram several months back, if you want to go back and watch that, about did like 5 or 6 recommendations, but the number one is called The Great War by G.J. Meyer. The reason I recommend that is it's a single volume and it tells the entire story of the Great War, which is very hard to do in less than 1,000 pages. And I think he does in like 800. And the other one is, it's called George, Nicholas, and Wilhelm, Tale of 3 Royal Cousins. And so what it does is it tracks the lives of the 3 emperors who were emperors at the time of the outbreak and kind of the lead up. But the reason I love that book is because it's like a personal story of like the interlocking connections between the families. And they put that in the context of geopolitics and they end right at the outbreak of the Great War. So all of the alliances and the monarchy and like, it's easier when you have characters. You know, it's easier to relate to something instead of like Germany says this and so says this. It's like all this like family drama between like Queen Victoria is just like meddling grandma, and then like all of her grandsons become all these emperors, and the whole theory between the alliances. What if they were all interrelated? It would make war less likely, but it actually made it a lot more likely because they were squabbling all the time. So anyway, I love those 2 books.
Yeah, we're wired to think in terms of story and interpersonal relationships, for better or for worse. So
it's
you're
easier
much
to
more
comprehend.
likely to like absorb it and remember it when it's framed in that sort of.
I try to recommend books which you'll stick to, and after you get past that, I have some more for you. Okay.
All right, this one here. You read this one
is a
because
fun
it's
one
for me too.
Thomas Cressilius, I hope I said that correctly. Krystal's swimming career. Krystal, I recently learned you were a D1 swimmer. Me too. Congratulations. What did you swim?
Congratulations.
Do you think, like I do, that swimming is a great sport for young people that builds character? What lessons did you take away from swimming? I hope you are both well and you have room for a lighthearted question. Plenty of room for a lighthearted question.
I definitely think that swimming helped me become the person that I am. Like, it definitely. First of all, anytime you're competing at a relatively high level, anytime even outside of competition, like you just take something really seriously and push yourself to what are your absolute limits, you learn a lot about yourself. Like you learn what are your limits, you learn how much mental toughness you have, you learn like strategies for how to get through things that are exceptionally difficult or go, beyond what you ultimately thought was possible. So yeah, I think probably what lessons did I take from swimming is one of the questions. I think one of the things I learned is just like that I'm a competitive person, number one, that I think better when I'm physically active, number two, and that I think it helped me to be able to access a flow state more often, which is something that, on this show, certain days, like, we feel really on.
Yeah.
Certain days, it's like every segment is hard and it's just the words don't want to come and you say things, you're like, well, that's not even a sentence. What?
Right. But we have to do it for them. Like, you got to push through for everybody. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But I feel like swimming has helped me have fewer of those days than maybe I would otherwise have. It's funny because I always thought, I have 3 kids. I always just assumed that my kids would probably be into swimming as well. But I have to say, being a mom now and being on the other side of it, I have so much respect and appreciation for my mom because being a swim mom sucks. Like, those swim meets are so long. You're trapped in these chlorine-filled, it's like, it's like some sort of toxic gas war on you. I mean, and it's hot and sweaty in there. It's a lot for a parent, and the practice are every day. It's just all-consuming. So actually, my kids are not in swimming. I'm pushing them in other directions because that time commitment on the parent side is just absolutely brutal.
We don't talk enough about that.
Yeah,
you really can't participate in a lot of these events if you don't have parents who are willing to drive you to stuff.
Yeah, and my mom was, lucky. Like, she was a stay-at-home mom, and so she was able to do it. And she would take me to practice every day. She'd make me a full meal that I would bring with me to practice. And then after that, I would go to dance, and she'd like feed me something on the way there too. I mean, this was like full-time job for her.
Right.
Just keeping my swimming thing going. So anyway, shout out to the moms out there who are making all of that.
Shout out to the swim moms.
that are not me.
All right. Last question.
Change to independent podcast. Rishi Sachdeo?
I hope that's right. All right.
I'm sure that's not even close, but we're going to go with it. I've really loved your show since you launched Breaking Points as an independent podcast. I didn't see much before when you guys we're working for a company to produce content. So I don't have good context of what changed. That's interesting that you found us after that. What do you feel have been the most unexpected differences from the launch of Breaking Points, and is there anything you missed from the way things were with the prior iteration of the show? What would you say?
Well, we have to run a business now, so like, that's hard. We have to learn about taxes, and we have employees, and we have to make sure everything runs on time, and the buck really starts with us. I would say but I love that. Honestly, that's the really rewarding part, is that we own this thing 100%. There's no outside influence. There's no outside people. If we want something to go a certain way, the only stakeholders are you and I, and we just have to make it happen. So that's the most rewarding but different part. And it also is like the production side of it is so difficult. Like we try to make, like we promise our premiums to you guys 11 a.m. and it's like, you have no idea. I'm watching this clock constantly. And like, we know exactly when we have to stop so that we can export, so that we can upload. I mean, we have screamed at YouTube and them for not processing our stuff on time. So it's really more about learning every single chain of production. We have a big announcement on Monday. Technologically, we had to learn quite a bit about how we can upgrade our studio. There's all kinds of stuff that goes into it that we just never had to deal with before, but it's so much more rewarding, in my opinion. And just a relief.
Oh, it's so much better. I mean, to be the person who makes these decisions and that it doesn't feel like it's arbitrary, that you're totally in control, that if there is a screw up, it's very likely your fault.
Right, it's my fault.
Like I did that, and just to own it. Is a much, much better state of affairs. And I would say the thing we both commented on when we first started doing the show independent is how much easier it actually is content-wise to do the show.
10 times easier.
Because at The Hill, there was this demand that we had to do so many segments, so many clips. And so you inevitably end up with multiple segments every day that you're like, I don't really care that much about
you're like,
this.
honestly, I barely care about this, but because they're making us do this segment, we have to do a segment. And it's like, I want to put on the best product for you guys.
And so that has been a huge relief, both just in terms of the performance of it, but also in terms of just feeling really good about the product. Because we didn't feel great putting out segments that were like, we don't really think we don't really care that much. We're not that into this segment, but we're like still trying to get you to watch it.
Here's the trick.
Did not feel good about that.
Look at the time. There were some of those Hill segments we would do like 3 minutes.
3 minutes, and we're like.
And I'd be like, get me the fuck out of here.
And it would feel like a long 3 minutes. Yeah, so I'd say that was a big thing. And then we also changed at The Hill after every segment, we'd stop. And then we'd restart.
Right.
And so now we just flow from one segment to the next. And that also makes a huge difference.
It's better too.
Because you can get into that flow state and just stay there and be on it and continue to move forward.
It's better too, because I realize this, now that we put it out as a podcast, it only makes sense to do it not in discrete blocks, but as a full thing, especially because you guys pay to be able to watch the show full and uncut. It wouldn't make any sense. Start, stop, start, stop, start, stop.
Right.
So it's a better user experience for you. It's actually a better performance experience for us. That's another big,
I think
big
it
part
makes
of the
us.
change.
I think it makes us better hosts because we can. Yeah, you can just get, if you're in that flow state, you can just continue rather than having to stop and start, and that really made it feel a lot more challenging. So we love doing this show for you guys. Thank you for enabling us to do it. We love you guys. Y'all are amazing. Thank you for your questions. Continue to send them in. You guys have a fantastic weekend, and we will see you back here tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.